Welcome to Demonic Diaries, the YouTube channel where we explore the darkest corners of the human mind. Join me, your host, as I delve into the pages of terrifying tales and haunting stories. From the depths of hell to the darkest depths of the human psyche, we'll be your guide through the most bone-chilling and spine-tingling stories that will keep you up at night. So buckle up and prepare to be scared, because on Demonic Diaries, every story has a dark side. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified of new videos. Let's get started. Number 1. Read this post before the mods delete it. They want to eat you. Have you noticed that our no-sleep engagement has been dropping over the years? It's only a slight downward slope, almost imperceptible. It's not that Redditors have been engaging any less frequently with the subreddit. It's simply that there are fewer members alive, and I just found out why. The moderators have been eating them. I don't know how many of you will have a chance to read this post. A few hundred, a few thousand. Likeliest scenario, the mods denounce me as a liar and swiftly delete this evidence. They wouldn't stop there. I can already picture hungering eyes poring over every word I've typed. In fact, I think what scares me most is that the moderators probably won't delete this. Nobody can stop them. They'll maliciously grin at the screen, preparing for their next meal. I already know that they're coming for me. On Friday evening, I received a horrifying document from my friend on Reddit. Let's call him Joe. He said that he'd received the document from a once prolific poster on this subreddit. I won't name the user. I've messaged the aforementioned user repeatedly, but there's been no response. The document included a list of Reddit usernames, and there was a message at the top. The moderators aren't human. Your time has come when you receive the purple notification. I snapped my neck around to face the open bedroom door behind me. I live alone, and my hauntingly hollow house often plays tricks on me, but I know what I saw. In the reflection of a pitch-black segment on my screen, I caught a ghastly glimpse of a twig-like man on the unlit landing. He had been standing in my doorway and watching me. His form flitted from view before I had the chance to look directly at him. Ping. On my desktop monitor, there was a new Reddit notification. The message came from the no-sleep moderators, but the username wasn't green. It was purple. As if that weren't horrifying enough, the message read, "No-sleep fear tastes so sweet. Your haunted brain is what I'll eat." A melodic humming sound echoed around the vast nothingness of my grand cavernous home, the twisted tune of whatever was watching me. Body twitching, I tried to suppress my fear and compose myself. I wanted to believe Joe had orchestrated the masterful prank, even though I knew he was far too serious a fellow for anything like that. I messaged him, seeking reassurance that nothing untoward had occurred. He replied, "Are you shitting me? Come over to my place." I just received the same message. I don't know whether we've been hacked by someone, but it's given me the heebie-jeebies. The last thing I wanted to do was venture to my friend's house at 1:45, but I was far too frightened to stay in my house of horrors. Besides, Joe only lived a few minutes away on foot. Not that a pitch-black walk really appealed to me, either. Shadows dance along the walls of every alleyway I passed. Anyone else, in an ordinary circumstance, would have chalked that up to trickery of the light. But I know it was the same insidious, inhuman figure that I saw on the upstairs landing of my house. It was following me. I hurried to Joe's apartment building and frantically hammered the buzzer. He didn't respond. After ringing desperately for several minutes, somebody finally appeared in the lobby and opened the door for me. "Hi Paul. Are you here to see Joe?" Mrs. Callender asked. I hurriedly nodded my head and slid past her, sprinting up the stairs to apartment 11. Joe hadn't answered his buzzer or my numerous phone calls, so I was fully prepared to kick down his door. No need. It was ajar. Lightly pushing it open, I gazed into my friend's dark, eerily still flat. As I tiptoed inside, I breathlessly observed my surroundings. I didn't want to announce my presence. Joe wasn't a prankster, and if he were, he still wouldn't have done something so elaborate. I knew it wasn't a game. Then, I heard a looping hum. That same melodic medley from my house. A foreboding arpeggio. There was a squelching sound from within the kitchen. My head told me to run, but my legs were guided by some external force. I was unable to resist the siren song. What I witnessed in that room fundamentally broke me as a person. Joe lay on the kitchen table, sprawled out like a slaughtered starfish, and he had been scalped with maliciously meticulous precision. Above him, a shapeless shadow munched merrily on the gray matter sitting in his fractured skull. The inhuman Reddit moderator was devouring his haunted brain, as it had promised. Horrifyingly, Joe was still alive. His teary eyes locked onto mine whilst his limbs were seizing. Flesh in the great tower, he stuttered, losing his brain function. Yes, 11 times. The shadow had no discernible form, but I know its shadowy head turned to face me. It developed an opening that vaguely resembled a crooked smile. I wailed internally, too stunned to speak, and fled the kitchen. The thing pursued me. I didn't have to turn around to verify that. I bounded upstairs and barricaded myself in the upstairs bathroom. That's where I've been hiding for the past day. I can't stop thinking about Joe. I'm plagued by the horrific sight of him lying there, losing his brain piece by piece. How does it feel to lose one's brain so slowly? I don't want to imagine. Perhaps I'll die of thirst before the shadow breaks inside. I hope so. Just heed my warning and leave this subreddit before it's too late. Number 2. I learned how to no-clip into an alternate reality. Ever since I was a child, I have had strange experiences, accidentally entering into a dark world which I came to think of as the Badlands. I've seen people call it no-clipping, which is as good a word for it as any. The first time it ever happened, I was coming home from school. My parents both worked late, so I was all alone. I walked into my front door, my head down, so at first I didn't even notice what was happening all around me. It was as if I had walked into the wrong house. The house I lived in with my family was a small duplex that we kept clean with Persian carpets and mirrors all along the front hallway. The house I had actually entered looked abandoned, with black water dripping from the ceiling, floors that looked like they were about to collapse, and ceilings that hung down so low, and had so much black mold, that it was a miracle they were still standing. I tried to spin around and run, but the door had slammed and locked behind me. Despite looking for any deadbolt or other lock on the handle, I could find nothing, but there was no way to get it open. I pulled with all the strength an 8-year-old could muster, pulling hard, screaming, slamming my little fist into the soggy, ancient wood. I hoped someone would hear me. Then I heard something slithering behind me. Its breath sounded ragged and strained, as if it were choking on its mucus. It coughed constantly. I turned, my heart beating fast, my eyes as white as dinner plates, and saw a creature from my worst nightmare. It was a woman, or at least half of a woman. She pulled herself forward on rotting arms, her entrails and intestines dragging behind her. The lower part of her body was entirely missing. She had no legs or waist. How she could still be alive was totally beyond my child's mind to comprehend. As she got within 10 feet of me, her head jerked up suddenly, her jaw opening far too wide, and showing a mouth full of fangs streaked with clotted gore. Bloody trails ran down her chin and naked, decaying breasts from her open mouth. Flies swarmed around her, as her body gave off a smell like rotting roadkill and copper. 2 huge black wings unfurled from the rotting skin of her back, and with a sudden, savage leap, she flew into the air, her mouth wide open and aimed at my throat. Screaming in terror, I pushed with all my strength at the door, and at the last possible moment, it flew open behind me, dumping me out onto the sidewalk in front of my house. I fell hard on my back, shrieking, scraping my hands and elbows as I tried to crawl backwards on all fours. The door slammed behind me, and a heavy thump smashed into it, rattling the entire front of the house. My neighbor, a sweet old woman named Mrs. Fullman, ran over from her front yard, a gardening shears still in her right hand. "Dear child, what is wrong with you?" she cried, putting one trembling hand over her chest. "You nearly gave me a heart attack." I pointed at the front door with one shaking finger, but now there was no sign of the Badlands or the creature I had seen. It looked like just a regular front door on another stereotypical suburban home. As I grew older, I realized the creature I had seen was real, a type of vampire from the Philippines called a tik-tik. They leave the lower half of their bodies behind when they go out to feed. How she got here, thousands of miles away from the Philippines, was only one mystery among many, and not even a very large one. Wherever I went when I no-clipped, it was not necessarily attached to the original location of this world. Or maybe the tik-tiks existed all over the globe. I would never find the answer to those questions. After this, however, whenever I opened a door, I would peer inside and make sure there wasn't some strange, otherworldly dimension on the other side. This worked well for years, until I was 17 and coming home from working at a restaurant one cold full day. The place where the restaurant was located was on the border of a city, and it was an extremely nasty place at night. Drug dealers and prostitutes controlled that area of the town. I had just walked out of the restaurant, smelling like pizza and fried food, a smell which seemed to seep permanently into whatever clothes I was wearing when I was at work. My head was down, as I was texting a friend from school about a camping trip we were planning that weekend. Because of this, I didn't notice the three young men silently following me, red bandanas wrapped around the dark skin of their foreheads to mark them as members of the Bloods. When I turned to take a shortcut through an alleyway, they followed close behind, then ran up on me. I heard footsteps coming and looked back in shock. One of them had a pistol out, kept pointed down for now. The gun looked huge and as black as the night I woke through. "Yo," one of them screamed at me. "Stop right there, motherfucker." That was all I needed to hear. I took off, sprinting wildly down the alleyway. But they were faster than I was. Within seconds, I felt a hand on my shoulder. In a panic, my subconscious mind took over. It brought up my past experiences in that other world, like a video running through my third eye. Breathing hard, I pulled away from the hand that seeked to stop me running right into a solid brick wall behind a dumpster. I thought I would smash my face and chest into it, so instinctively closed my eyes as I impacted it. But there was no collision. I went right through it. Somehow, I had, for the first time, intentionally no-clipped out of the normal world and into the Badlands. Looking around, I saw I had entered a seemingly abandoned post-apocalyptic version of the city. Some of the buildings were half-collapsed, smashed bricks and shattered glass littering the ground. I walked through the ruins of the building I was in, jumping over the broken wall back out into the alleyway I had just come from. There was no sign of the gang members or anyone else, for that matter. At first, I just doubled over and caught my breath, glad to be out of immediate danger. Little did I realize that I had gone out of the frying pan and into the fire. There were far worse things in the Badlands than simple gang members, and I was about to find it out the hard way. I walked through the streets back towards the downtown area, finding a warehouse that was mostly intact. I pushed on the front door. While the warehouse in my world was a bustling distributor for Spanish foods and drinks to the local bodegas, here it appeared to produce something much more unsettling. The first floor had an assembly line with half-finished torture devices. I saw massive iron maidens, the countless sharp spikes waiting for whatever unfortunate victim would be shoved inside. Thankfully, the doors were not yet welded on the front of them. Farther on, I also saw brazen bulls. They were huge metal constructions, with a door in the side where the victim would be forced in, a fire lit underneath the iron to make it scalding hot. The victim would burn alive within the brazen bull, a series of pipes and horns underneath the head of the bull leading to the oven, so that the tortured screams would sound like the roaring of a bull. Most of them were still missing their metal feet, while others still waited for the doors to be welded on. I had seen enough. I wanted to get out of this place. I stopped looking after that, running up to the third and topmost floor. The building smelled dusty and ancient. Spiderwebs got tangled in my hair, causing me to freak out and spin in circles, beating myself on my head and face and chest to make sure no creeping bugs or spiders were going under my shirt or crawling down my nose and mouth. After I had calmed down, I carefully walked towards the window facing the street, keeping my arms in front and waving them back and forth to try to keep the spiderwebs out of my face. Looking down, I saw someone walking along the street. From where I stood, they looked like nothing more than a dark silhouette. I could discern no features, no eyes or hair, nose or even ears, and their clothes, if they were wearing any, must have been pure black. They looked like nothing more than a walking shadow to me. Getting closer to the window, I tried to get a closer look, but the window was old and falling apart. As I put my hands on it, leaning forward, a pane of glass fell out. The creature looked up instantly, the glass shattering on the street a few stories below. Taking a deep breath in, I stepped back from the window, a sense of panic and an unsettling fear rising in my chest. Below me, I heard a door open and close. "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," I whispered to myself, looking for somewhere to hide. Heavy footsteps were running up the stairs now, and I had no time to think. I found an old desk nearby, crawling underneath it and pulling the box cutter I always kept in my pocket at work out. It seemed like such a small and useless weapon, especially in a place like this. Within seconds, the third floor door slammed open, and I heard a heavy, distorted breathing coming from the entryway. The creature slowly walked over to the window. Peeking out from my hiding spot, I saw it looking down from the window where I had just stood. A soft tickling started behind my left ear. Reaching back, I brushed at the spot and saw a huge fat black spider stuck to my hand. Screaming in instinctual panic, I threw it across the room, crawling out from the hiding spot. I wondered how many others were crawling on me at that very moment. But as I crawled out, I stopped, realizing my stupidity. The creature was now looking directly at me, standing only 10 feet away. It was the purest black, as if it were truly nothing more than a shadow. As it stared at me, however, its features began to transform. The darkness of its silhouette seemed to melt away from it, puddling into a shadow at its feet. New features melted onto his face, like liquid wax solidifying into a human face and body. With horror, I realized I was looking at my own face, except it wasn't exactly the same. The creature had used my likeness, but the eyes I looked at were bloated and yellow. The skin was falling off, rotting, its hair dry and covered in clotted blood. Maggots infested every inch of its skin, wriggling and falling off in droves. Spiders crawled into its mouth and out of its nose and ears. It had transformed into me as a decaying body, as if I had been murdered and thrown in a swamp for a few days. Shrieking, I tried to crawl back away from it on all fours as it walked slowly up to me. "Sweet, sweet child," it said to me in a croaking, inhuman voice, bending down close to me. I could smell the rancid gases emanating from its mouth, smell the bloating of its intestines and stomach as liquefied shit and rotten meat dripped from every orifice of its body. "You're a long way from home." It put its hand around my throat. I felt some of the skin slough off as I tried to struggle away, but its grip was like iron. Lifting me up, it held me up in the air with one hand, bringing me inches away from its sickly, jaundiced eyes. "Get away from," I tried to say, but it was choking off my air supply. My vision started to turn white with adrenaline and oxygen deprivation. With a last burst of energy, I took the box cutter, slicing it across its right eye. With a shriek like a banshee, it dropped me. I fell hard on my back, my head slamming into the concrete floor. I saw stars for a moment, but I didn't have time to waste getting my bearings. Pushing myself up with unsteady hands, wavering, I began to sprint away from the abomination. I looked back as I went through the third-floor door to the stairwell, seeing vitreous fluid and maggots leaking from its slit-open eye. It wiped away the disgusting mixture, then took after me, running at a superhuman speed that I could never hope to escape. Taking the stairs two at a time, descending at a suicidal pace, I made it back to the first floor before it caught up with me. I had run past the brazen bolts to the section of Iron Maidens when it grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. With an insane, burning anger shining in its remaining eye, it opened its mouth. A spider crawled out, jumping onto my face. I would have screamed, but it had grabbed me by the face and throat, and it now looked as if it would kiss me. It began to suck at the air, and I felt myself weakening. I saw white light exiting my mouth and going into its open maw, as more spiders and maggots crawled from its body onto mine. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I pushed it as hard as I could. It stumbled back, falling into the open casket of an Iron Maiden standing directly behind it. While the monster was still unsteady, I put both my hands out and ran at it, shoving it into the spikes of the Iron Maiden directly behind it. The spikes went right through it and into my hands. Shrieking in pain, feeling warm blood begin to run down both of my arms from multiple holes in my palms and fingers, I pulled back. Instinctually, I began to bat away the spiders that had landed on me and crawled in my hair, around my face and chest, leaving small splashes of my own blood all over my body and clothes. Then I heard more footsteps from behind me. Spinning around, I saw two more of those things. Without a second thought, I took off running towards the back of the factory, hoping with all of my heart that an emergency exit existed there. They gained on me rapidly. As I saw the broken doorway in the back, I began to think of my world. A vision of blue skies, moonlit nights, oceans, cars and other facets of the normal world ran through my third eye in moments. A hand landed on my shoulder, but I had reached the door. Pulling away, I jumped through it. I landed heavily on the city streets behind the factory, noticing with relief that I was back in the real world, but I had not lost the creatures. They had both come through close behind me, pure black shadows that bent close to my face, as if examining me. One had opened its mouth and was approaching my face, unhinging its jaw and showing a flood of sickly white light within its body. I heard the screaming of children and the cries of tortured souls within these abominations, as if the souls of their victims were forever trapped within their eldritch frames. At that moment, I heard a few soft footsteps. With my last breath, I yelled, "Help! Hey, he's over here." I heard a deep voice yell. Looking up, I saw the three gang members, one of them with his pistol still out. "Motherfucker, you're gonna regret," the leader started to say. Then he noticed the two black creatures. They had turned to look at the three with hungry interest. "What the fuck?" The two abominations rushed at the three thugs. I saw the leader of the three raise his pistol and shoot the front one directly in the chest. It stumbled for a moment, then stood back up, rushing forward. The three thugs tried to turn and run, but they didn't make it more than a few steps. The abomination in the lead grabbed the first one and slammed his head into a brick wall, dropping him to the ground in an unconscious heap. Then they closed the distance to the remaining two, each grabbing one by the throat and putting their lips up to the thugs' mouths. As I got up, still unsteady and bleeding from multiple spots all over my hands, my only thought was to get as far away as possible from those abominations. The last thing I heard was the gasping of the gang members and their cries for help as their life was sucked out of them. It has been a few days since then, and now reports are coming from all over the city of mysterious bodies, dried up and desiccated, as if their insides had been sucked out by a spider. I know those monsters are hard at work, and though they may have saved my life, I hope I never see them again. I don't think I want to know Klep anymore, either. Number 3. An old asylum. My name is Emily, and I recently moved to Sabatis, Maine to start a new life. The town is small and quaint, with a population of just over 4,000 people. I was excited to move into my new home, but strange things have been happening since I arrived. I first noticed the strange happenings when I woke up in the middle of the night to find all of the kitchen cabinets open. I thought it was strange, but assumed it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I started hearing strange noises at night, like whispers and footsteps, even though I was home alone. I decided to investigate the strange happenings, and learned that my house was built on the site of an old asylum that was abandoned years ago. Locals have always believed that the asylum was haunted, and that the spirits of the patients still haunt the grounds. As I dug deeper into the history of the asylum, I found out that it was closed down after a series of mysterious deaths occurred. Patients were found dead in their rooms, with no explanation as to how they died. Some say that the killer still roams the halls of the asylum, searching for new victims. One day, while I was walking my dog, I met my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. He seemed friendly enough, but something about him gave me the creeps. He was always watching me, and would often stare at me through his window when I walked by. As I got to know Mr. Jenkins better, I learned that he used to work at the asylum before it was shut down. He would often tell me stories about the patients and the strange happenings that occurred on the grounds. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew more about the mysterious deaths than he let on. One day, my friend Sarah came to visit me from out of town. She was fascinated by the history of the asylum and begged me to take her on a tour. I reluctantly agreed, and we made our way to the abandoned building. As we walked through the halls of the asylum, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, Sarah disappeared. I called out her name, but there was no answer. I searched the entire building, but she was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah was still missing. The police were no help, and I was left to search for her on my own. It was then that I realized that the strange happenings were not just in my head. Someone, or something, was stalking me. I began to fear for my life, and would often wake up in the middle of the night to find scratches on my arms and legs. I knew that I had to find Sarah, or else I would be the next victim of the killer. One day, while I was walking my dog, I stumbled upon a secret room in the basement of the asylum. Inside, I found a diary belonging to one of the patients. As I read through the diary, I realized that the patient had been wrongly accused of murder, and was locked up in the asylum for years. The patient's diary detailed their plans for revenge against the people who wronged them, including the doctors and nurses who mistreated them. I knew then that the killer was not a ghost or a spirit, but a real person seeking revenge for a past injustice. We hope you found these stories both thrilling and thought-provoking. Delving into the darkest parts of the human psyche can be a scary and unsettling experience, but it's also an important one. By exploring our deepest fears and desires, we can gain a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel for more spine-tingling content. And always remember to keep the lights on.